Hello and welcome to AJC's Virtual Global Forum. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mirels and I'm a member of the American Jewish Committee's Executive Council. My siblings and I have been deeply involved with AJC for years. AJC is family. It's part of my family and operates like a family. And this mentality, along with the Jewish value that we are all responsible one for another, is the lens through which AJC has carried out its work for over a century. I've had the privilege of traveling with AJC to various parts of the world, and I've seen its remarkable impact up close. AJC seeks to create a better world for all of us, whether by combating anti-Semitism and all forms of hate, advocating for Israel's rightful place in the community of nations, or vigorously protecting human rights around the world. AJC is on the front lines and will never give up. I hope you will join our AJC family as we continue to reimagine what's possible and to work to bring the Jewish prophetic vision of a more peaceful world to fruition. If you'd like to be part of this vital work, please join us by visiting ajc.org. Thank you once again for being with us here today. Please enjoy the program.
The American Jewish Committee was one of a small band of non-governmental organizations present at the creation of the United Nations. Jacob Blaustein was one of the most influential figures in that conference, and the institute that bears his name continues to play a vital part
Through Jacob Blaustein Institute and Felice Gaer, you have been a leader in seeking to hold the perpetrators of war crimes accountable.
The Jacob Blaustein Institute has been a tireless friend of human rights and to my office, and a special tribute to Felice Gaer, the highly regarded champion of the universal human rights agenda in her own right.
rest of the world has ignored the evidence for too long, now there is no excuse, because now we all know.
Anti-Semitism is a threat to global peace.
What this report states so clearly and explicitly is that the reason to be disturbed by anti-Semitism is that it is a threat to democracy, it is a threat to human rights.
I'm Felice Gaer, director of AJC's Jacob Blaustein Institute for the Advancement of Human Rights. This year, our institute marks its 50th anniversary. And on this occasion, we recognize the lifelong human rights contributions of Dr. Ahmed Shaheed, currently the United Nations Independent Expert on Freedom of Religion or Belief, its Special Rapporteur. Earlier, he was UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran, and before that, Foreign Minister of the Maldives. As Foreign Minister, he led the Maldives to embrace universal human rights standards, and he tried to establish contacts between his country and Israel. And he was appointed by the United Nations as Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran. But when hardline Islamists came into power, threatening him, as they had done before he seized power, he went into exile. From a base at the University of Essex in England, Dr. Shaheed continued his work as the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran. He mobilized diaspora victims and human rights groups to help him monitor and report on Iran's actions in detail. Dr. Shaheed has strived to ensure that whenever human rights are under threat, there is an effective international response. Like the Jacob Blaustein Institute, Dr. Shaheed has sought to protect everyone's rights, not solely the rights of those who share his religion or nationality. As Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion, he published the UN's first standalone report on global anti-Semitism in 2019. AJC called that report historic, and it truly is. Dr. Shaheed, we deeply appreciate your personal courage and conviction, and especially we recognize your role as an effective and courageous advocate for universal human rights.
Good afternoon, Director Gaer. Delighted to see you again. And thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this historic commemoration of the Jacob Blaustein Institute. Let me extend to you and your colleagues and all those associated with JBI warm felicitations on reaching this historic milestone with such an impressive track record. You and JBI have made exemplary contributions to advancing human rights through the UN, especially in strengthening the effectiveness of the UN's human rights mechanisms. Your own personal contribution, not just through the JBI, but in your own capacity as member of the UN Committee Against Torture and other roles, is not only legendary, but a source of inspiration for everyone. I'm humbled and honored to be invited to join you at this global forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shaheed. You know, since 2016, you've been in the role of Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief. In this role, you recognize the unique power of international human rights standards and mechanisms that we at JBI have tried to build at the United Nations. As Rapporteur, you've been an advocate for the rights of religious minorities. And you have also confronted the challenges faced by rights holders who have not previously received much attention, including women, non-believers, LGBTQ people, and others. Can you tell us what has motivated you to take this extraordinarily inclusive approach to the issue?
Well, human rights are universal. An inclusive approach to human rights is therefore not an option. It is the only approach consistent with the underlying principles of human rights. If we overlook those in the most vulnerable situations, we lose the essential character of human rights as rights, and they become privileges for the few. My UN mandate is very broad, covering the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion or belief. And these freedoms apply equally to everyone, regardless of race, religion, nationality, gender, or other characteristic. Trends in globalization, increase in diversity of our communities, rising intolerance both online and offline, show that it is minorities and dissenters and others who may be in a vulnerable situation who most frequently face rights violations. And if the human rights framework cannot defend the rights of the most vulnerable, it would lack legitimacy and credibility. And while, of course, organized religions have made enormous contributions to all aspects of our life, there are often embedded biases and prejudices which become expressed as harmful practices towards women, girls, and LGBT plus persons. And of course, as the preamble to the Universal Human Rights Declaration states in its opening line, that the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world is a recognition of the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of every member of the human family. These insights clearly call for an inclusive approach.
Thank you, Dr. Shaheed. You know, in your report on global anti-Semitism, you implored governments to recognize what AJC and the Jacob Blaustein Institute have been saying, that anti-Semitism was rising around the world and is a serious human rights concern. You said anti-Semitism threatens not only Jews, but the foundations of democratic societies. You asked governments to adopt the IRA working definition on anti-Semitism, the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition. And you recognize the danger of anti-Semitism in a way that none of your UN predecessors did. And you called on governments, companies, and even the United Nations to do more to fight anti-Semitism. Can you tell us why you felt it was necessary to sound the alarm about anti-Semitism? And in the fight against anti-Semitism, what changes do you seek at the United Nations itself to make it a reliable ally, rather than, as it is so frequently, an antagonist?
I found a serious lack of attention to rights violations faced by Jewish communities in the work of my UN mandate. It is very strange, given the fact that one of the key features of the rising religious and racial hatred globally is violence against Jews. The number of attacks targeting Jews is not only heartbreaking, but disproportionately high, and this required a response. Anti-Semitism is often propagated by influential political leaders. It is the oldest form of religious hatred. It is global. It occurs across the entire political spectrum, and it is growing. And although it takes many forms, at its core is a conspiracy theory, a scapegoating, a dehumanization, in themselves egregious and highly destructive of democracy. Of course, parts of the UN fan the flames of this intolerance. Reforms are needed to ensure that Israel is not treated any differently to other states, and to seek Israel's cooperation by focusing on the constructive universal peer review process, which highlights the cooperative character of the UN system and also that all states are equally accountable to a global common standard. Human rights is not a zero-sum political game. Some parts of the UN, less open to political abuses, are already playing helpful roles. My report called on the UN Secretariat to take the lead in combating anti-Semitism through education, awareness raising, promoting peer-to-peer learning, and to use the IHRA working definition, as you referred to just now, as a non-legal tool to combat anti-Semitism as a global human rights challenge and not to regard anti-Semitism as a threat to Jews alone. And on this subject, I do want to thank you and JBI and other members of the various Jewish communities worldwide for your cooperation while I worked on my UN report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shaheed. From 2011 to 2016, you served as the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran, as I mentioned. You produced groundbreaking reports that ensured that the world knew the truth about the crackdown after the 2009 elections and other repression facing the Iranian people, even as the government engaged in a vicious campaign of harassment and threats against you personally. What can you tell us about the state of human rights in Iran today from your perspective as Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion? And have you seen any changes in the government's approach to this issue?
I'm afraid things haven't improved. My current work concerns a number of serious human rights issues in Iran, including the use of the state machinery to enforce discriminatory religious teachings, especially those that violate the human rights of women, children, religious minorities, and LGBT persons, as well as the right to life, among others. Iran is possibly the clearest example of how a country of great promise can be ruined by religious intolerance and disregard for human rights. Such intolerance, of course, does not spare the majority Shia community either, where dissent is punished. But at the present time, I'm particularly concerned about the plight of the Baha'i community, who are facing systematic persecution, possibly designed to destroy their presence in the country. And this persecution has now extended to other countries where Iran has some influence.
Thank you, Dr. Shaheed. Democracy and human rights are being challenged in many parts of the world today. What do you see as the future of human rights as it's confronted by radicalism, populism, and cynicism about the capacity of international institutions to combat these dark forces and to protect people?
Even before the pandemic, people have been talking about backsliding on human rights across many indicators, linked to the rise of new powers without a robust commitment to human rights, election of populist leaders, and mainstreaming of far-right groups. The pandemic has in many ways accentuated these trends, and we can think of the lurking danger of climate change and the rising threats from new technologies. But even in some of the darkest moments in the past decade, it has always been clear that we've been through darker times. The lessons learned remain valid, including on what it takes to fight back against hatred. Many of us stress the power of people, of solidarity, of mobilization, of coalition building, of investing in children and youth, and of using all means available for the good. I draw hope from the fact that more children are in schools today than ever before, more legal protections are offered today to LGBT persons than ever before, and more people can get online. I have seen my own mandate help people. I've seen the power of UN human rights mechanisms to protect victims of abuse that need it and have few other means of support. These protect people around the world. In terms of my own work, by no means am I finished raising the issue of anti-Semitism as a human rights concern with the UN. I have raised it in the General Assembly 2 years back, and now I will go to the Human Rights Council and present an action plan on how to combat anti-Semitism before my mandate is up next year. I shall, of course, work on this well beyond my UN tenure. As I have said before, Felice, none of us is safe until all of us are safe.
Thank you, Dr. Shaheed. That's been something Jacob Blaustein and the American Jewish Committee have stood for many, many years. You really hearten us with that news of your plans for the future to stay with this issue. And Dr. Shaheed, you have been a game changer at the UN and in the human rights field. You've already accomplished things that few thought would be possible. On behalf of the American Jewish Committee's Jacob Blaustein Institute, We are so grateful to have you as a partner and an ally in the fight against anti-Semitism and in the defense for human rights for all people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Felice. I look forward to working with you and your colleagues. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lenny Krayzelburg, and I'm a 4-time Olympic gold medalist. I was born in Soviet Union, what is now Odessa, Ukraine. I immigrated to the United States in the late 80s with support of organizations like AJC, which were so instrumental in helping so many to leave the Soviet Union and overwhelming anti-Semitism there. Before I moved to Los Angeles, my family didn't really speak about being Jewish. Jews weren't able to have strong identities in the Soviet Union, and it wasn't until I arrived in LA that I felt proud to be a Jew, proud to talk about, proud to be exposed to a Jewish culture. I was finally able to say openly and securely that I was a Jew. I was a swimmer in the Soviet Union and continue swimming competitively in the United States. I was honored to be on 2 Olympic swim teams in 2000 and 2004, winning 4 Olympic gold medals. It felt so good to give back to the country that took my family and me in and gave us a new home. It's been a tremendous privilege to have success as a professional athlete and to use that success to share my story, my Jewish story around the country. I talk how I left Soviet Union and found in America the Jewish community and the Jewish identity that has been so special for me and my family. I also had a privilege to travel to the Maccabi Games in Israel. It was during the Second Intifada, a time when Israel really needed the support of global Jewish community more than ever. I remember feeling how important it was for me to say that I was going, despite all the terrorist attacks that were happening at that time. I hoped that if I went, I would influence other American athletes to go as well. And it worked. We had a strong American delegation that year. It was a very moving experience to be in Israel. Personally, for me, carrying a United States flag into an opening ceremony and to hear a Hatikva during that ceremony was really special. It was one of the defining moments in my life. I'm so grateful to America and to American Jewish community for giving me a new life outside Soviet Union. I am a proud American Jew.
Dear friends at the American Jewish Committee, it is my great honor to speak with you today on the American Jewish Committee's Virtual Global Forum 2021. 3 months ago, history was made when Kosovo was recognized by Israel. Diplomatic relations were established between our countries. But the relations between Israel and Kosovo didn't start just 3 months ago. Firstly, historical ties were embodied by the Kosovo Albanians while saving the life of Jewish neighbors during World War II, when its people gave their besa, the Albanian code of honor, for an uncompromised protection and rescue of every single Jew that entered its territory, even to the point of forfeiting their own lives. Secondly, during the Kosovo War in the late 90s, Israel sent a field hospital and a medical team to Kosovo, treating hundreds of patients and saving lives. Additionally, Israel absorbed 100 refugees, demonstrating outstanding humanitarian example. At the same time, the American Jewish Committee, having long-standing ties with Kosovo, launched a national fundraising effort to assist Kosovar refugees during the war of 1998-1999. This campaign provided support which was allocated for a school reconstruction project. We are very grateful for that, and we will not forget this long-standing friendship. In 2008, Kosovo declared its independence, becoming one of the world's youngest democracies. As a democracy, we share values such as inclusivity, promoting pluralism, freedom of speech, and fighting extremism. We have long respected the small Jewish community living in Kosovo, giving them equal rights as any other citizen, as well as full freedom of religion while preserving their heritage. Following these values, I am proud that the Republic of Kosovo decided to adopt the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which further demonstrates Kosovo's commitment to fighting anti-Semitism and ensuring the well-being of the Jewish community in our country. In this forum today, the Republic of Kosovo joins forces with other countries in the world to confront the reality of anti-Semitism being on the rise around the world. It was 80 years ago during the Second World War when we failed to recognize the harmful patterns of hate and loath which led to one of the most unfortunate events of our modern times history. We have indeed come a long way ever since. But today, the Jewish community needs once more a vocal confirmation from all of us about our undisputable and firm commitment to combat the rising tides of anti-Semitism so that we prevent regrets and apologies in the future. I am especially pleased that Israel recently recognized the Republic of Kosovo as an independent country. This was a key foundation in establishing our diplomatic relations, and I know that this is only the beginning. I appreciate and value the American Jewish Committee's efforts to promote these relations, bringing it to full fruition this March. This momentous and historic step will lead to further cooperation between Israel and Kosovo on many levels: science, energy, agriculture, high-tech, culture, academia, security, and others. I am grateful to the American Jewish Committee for supporting Kosovo's relations with Israel, and I look forward to our cooperation in the future. Thank you for your long-time dedication and friendship.
Dear David Harris, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so honored to speak at this year's American Jewish Committee Virtual Global Forum. As a German, this is a very special occasion for me, because the AJC has been at the forefront of re-establishing the Jewish community's relationship with Germany. Only 3 years after the end of the war, the AJC was the first global Jewish organization to engage. And that was even before the Federal Republic of Germany had been founded. In addition, the AJC has been a strong supporter of the European Union and of the NATO alliance ever since. Today, the AJC has regional offices covering all countries across Europe. In particular, the AJC's Transatlantic Institute here in Brussels plays an important role in our conversations with Israel and across the Atlantic. I know, dear David Harris, how much of this has been your work in the 31 years that you have been at the helm of the AJC. I have been lucky to meet you in person several times in Berlin and in New York. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you wholeheartedly for the excellent work you have been doing. Dear David, you are the son of 2 Holocaust survivors, and you have dedicated your life to the AJC's mission, your mission, to fight anti-Semitism and racism, to promote Jewish life, and to preserve the memory of the Holocaust. We are so privileged to be able to work with partners like you. And today, your fight, our fight against anti-Semitism is more urgent than ever. Anti-Semitism is on the rise across Europe and in the United States. Recent studies show that anti-Semitic incidents in the United States are at their highest level since the 1980s. And both sides of the Atlantic have recently seen terrorist attacks. I'm thinking of the victims in Pittsburgh, as well as in Halle and Paris. My thoughts are with the victims and with all the families who lost their loved ones. These attacks are a stark reminder of how dangerous anti-Semitism is for our society. It is a poison for our democratic values and an attack on our way of life. We must fight it together, and we have to eradicate it. Europe and the United States have since long joined forces when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism, and we will continue to do so. At the United Nations General Assembly, together with the United States, Canada, and Israel, the European Union hosted side events addressing the fight against anti-Semitism. And in 2019, we co-sponsored the informal General Assembly on anti-Semitism, because we are strongly committed to building a future free of anti-Semitism in Europe and beyond. After taking office as Commission President in 2019, I stepped up Europe's fight against anti-Semitism. And this is why, later this year, the Commission will adopt its first ever EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. With this strategy, we first want to strengthen our fight against anti-Semitism. Second, we want to preserve the memory of past atrocities. All European students should learn about the Holocaust, no matter their background, family history, or country of origin. And third, we want to foster Jewish life in Europe in all its diversity. We want to make sure that Jews are free to follow their religious and cultural traditions. And let me assure you, we will make this strategy ambitious. Jewish life is part of our societies, and we are determined to protect it. We are immensely glad that 76 years after the Holocaust, Jewish life is thriving again in schools, and kindergartens, in synagogues, and in fashionable kosher restaurants, in the heart of our communities. And we will never allow this to be threatened again. This EU strategy comes on top of what we have already initiated. This January, the Commission, together with the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, published a handbook for the practical use of their working definition of anti-Semitism. With this, we aim to support policymakers, judges, prosecutors, but also teachers, in recognizing anti-Semitic bias in their daily work, because to be able to eradicate anti-Semitism, you need to be able to identify every manifestation of it, including where it is subtle and insidious. And we also need to put a stop to hatred and anti-Semitism on the internet. Disinformation and the denial of facts are everywhere online. And the COVID-19 pandemic in particular has shown how quickly anti-Semitic conspiracy myths can spread. With our Digital Services Act, we make clear that online platforms have a crucial role in disseminating and promoting anti-Semitic material, and therefore they must take greater responsibility. Because not only individuals, but also every business, especially powerful tech giants, have to combat hatred and to stand for historical truth. Remembering the Shoah is our shared responsibility. But today, the last survivors are leaving us. And for many of our young people, the events of the Holocaust seem to belong to a distant past. Some have never even heard of Auschwitz. And this is why the European Commission has significantly increased the budget for preventing and addressing anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. And we will also take action if European money is used to call into question Israel's right to exist. Israel is a vitally important country for the European Union, not only because our common past, but also because of our common future. And the pandemic has brought Israel and the European Union even closer together. We congratulate Israel on its rapid and effective vaccination campaign. It is so good to see the vibrant cafes in Tel Aviv open again and to see life coming back to Israeli cities and beaches. We are happy that Europe has been able to contribute to this success. We know that in this pandemic, we are only safe if our neighbors are safe as well. In this spirit, Europe has exported almost as many doses of vaccine as it delivered to its own citizens. 12.5 million of these doses that European companies exported have gone to Israel. This is how friendship is supposed to be. It is strongest in adversity. I sincerely hope that with our successful vaccination campaigns, Israeli and European citizens will soon be able to visit each other again, for example, with the help of the Israeli Green Passport and the EU Digital COVID Certificate. Together, we want to build forward better. And with its recovery program, Next Generation EU, the European Union will invest in a greener and more digital future. And for this, Israel is an important, a crucial partner. For example, as recently as April, the European Investment Bank supported with 7.5 million euro a very interesting project. It is the first manufacturing plant for innovative thermal energy storage systems in Israel. And this technology can be key for a green and sustainable energy system in the European Union as well. We also want to step up our cooperation when it comes to digitization and innovation. Europe can learn from Israel's successes. We Europeans are excellent in making science with money, but we are not so good in making money out of science. And Israel is known for quickly translating scientific breakthroughs into business opportunities. So let's exchange the best ideas and learn from each other. Our vibrant partnership rests on a firm foundation. Some weeks ago, on April 25th, we celebrated 25 years of cooperation in science and innovation with Israel. Israel is a key partner in Horizon 2020, our EU research program, and altogether, Israeli scientists and organizations have participated so far in 2,100 projects under Horizon 2020. One of these projects I find especially intriguing is the so-called sniff phone. Researchers of the Israeli Institute for Technology, with the help of EU funding, have developed a smartphone type of device that measures exhaled breath for early diagnosis of cancer. The sniff phone was even awarded the EU Commission's prize for Most Innovative Project in 2018. And just recently, the EU granted another 18 million euro to 9 Israeli companies for research in COVID-19. So let's build on this success and continue for the next 7 years in the new innovation and research program, Horizon Europe. When I look back at the past we have come from, I sometimes think that is precisely this normality that makes our successful common journey to date so special. Ladies and gentlemen, the late US Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, and I quote, "Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." For me, this quote sums up the mission of the AJC in the best possible manner. And it describes why the AJC has been so successful for such a long time. You care about what you fight for. You never give up on your mission. And you have that unique ability to foster friendships around the world. Many of those friends are here today in your virtual global forum, and I am happy to be one of them. Thank you so much.
Sometimes it can feel like the whole world is against Israel. Having led the American Jewish Committee's advocacy efforts at the European Union over the past decade, I've learned an important lesson. Israel has many, many more friends than we think. This is why, in the summer of 2019, we founded the Transatlantic Friends of Israel, the first ever cross-party interparliamentary group dedicated to the alliance between Europe, the United States, Canada, and Israel, an alliance anchored in shared values, interests, and history.
We are many different lawmakers from different countries, actually from different continents, and of course from different political parties. We discuss a lot, we argue a lot when it comes to the issues of the day. But when it comes to strengthening our alliance with Israel and to deepening the transatlantic relations, this is where we can agree. I want to say a big thank you to our friends of AJC for creating this unique platform for lawmakers, namely the Transatlantic Friends of Israel.
Se trata de una guerra entre un Estado democrático que es Israel y una organización terrorista patrocinada por el régimen iraní.
We must finally designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization.
I want to thank the American Jewish Committee's Transatlantic Friends of Israel for launching this interparliamentary campaign to call on the EU to make the full designation.
I would like to send you my support for the Transatlantic Friends of Israel.
I support the Transatlantic Friends of Israel.
I support my Transatlantic Friends of Israel.
I support the Transatlantic Friends of Israel.
I support the Transatlantic Friends of Israel.
I support the Transatlantic Friends of Israel.
I support Transatlantic Friends of Israel. That's what friends are for.
I believe that AJC is more important than ever in an increasingly hostile environment.
Really pleased to be participating in this wonderful initiative.
We have only just begun.
Hello, my name is Merle Horwitz and I'm a member of AJC's Board of Governors. I'm also a very proud member of the board of the AJC's Transatlantic Institute in Brussels, the capital of the European Union. It's hard to imagine that 76 years after World War II, Europe has become such an important strategic partner to the Jews around the world. Strengthening trilateral relationships with EU, US, and Israel is of paramount importance. At the same time, there are political actors in Europe who remain hostile to Israel and refuse to understand the complexities and the precariousness of Israel's security situation. But with AJC's Transatlantic Institute, the tides have been shifting, and we are witnessing European officials understanding better the anti-Semitism and taking it seriously. Through the Transatlantic Friends of Israel, AJC has managed to forge much better relationships between European parliamentarians, members of Congress, and members of the Knesset, coming together to forge a much better tie on key issues. Just decades after the Shoah, AJC has a vision for engagement with Europe. From Brussels to Berlin, from Paris to Warsaw, as well as Prague, Rome, and Sofia, AJC is on the ground in Europe, against the backdrop of a very painful history. We are reimagining what is possible and making every effort to safeguard the Jewish future.
Monsieur le directeur exécutif, cher David, Madame la Présidente, chère Harriet, Mesdames et Messieurs les délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis, je souhaite tout d'abord remercier chaleureusement l'American Jewish Committee pour son invitation et vous dire toute l'importance que j'accorde à votre travail pour lutter contre l'antisémitisme et la haine, encourager le dialogue et promouvoir les valeurs démocratiques. Dans une période marquée par un regain des discours haineux, les tentatives de remise en cause du modèle démocratique, votre engagement est essentiel. Je veux à ce titre saluer l'action du bureau de l'AJC à Paris, installé peu après la Seconde Guerre mondiale, car je sais les liens étroits que votre organisation entretient avec la France, à l'image du parcours de votre directeur exécutif, cher David, récemment élevé au rang d'officier de la Légion d'honneur. À travers ce dialogue que nous entretenons de longue date, la France réaffirme son attachement à la défense des libertés religieuses et à la tolérance. Ce dialogue est le fruit d'une histoire française, celle d'un universel pluriel par lequel notre nation a été irriguée par les histoires multiples des Français juifs venus d'horizons divers, qui l'ont construite, enrichie, rendue elle-même dans les heures glorieuses comme dans les heures sombres. Je veux donc réitérer avec vigueur que l'antisémitisme est hier comme aujourd'hui un fléau inacceptable, injustifiable, face auquel nous devons sans relâche mobiliser toutes les énergies. Je sais l'attention que vous portez à la situation et à la sécurité des citoyens français de confession juive, dans un contexte où nous observons une nouvelle hausse des actes antisémites en Europe, mais aussi aux États-Unis. Aussi, je veux rappeler ici ma détermination sans faille et celle du gouvernement pour protéger l'ensemble de sa population et lutter contre toutes les formes de violence et de discrimination. Très tôt dans mon quinquennat, j'ai souhaité renforcer les moyens de la lutte contre l'antisémitisme en mettant en œuvre un plan national sous l'autorité du Premier ministre. La lutte contre l'antisémitisme commence par la capacité à nommer ce mal qui ronge notre société. Et c'est pour cela que la France reconnaît désormais officiellement la définition de l'antisémitisme adoptée par l'Alliance internationale pour la mémoire de la Shoah. Mais ce n'est évidemment pas suffisant. Il nous fallait aussi renforcer les actes. Nous avons créé un réseau d'enquêteurs, de magistrats spécialisés, afin de mieux accompagner les victimes d'actes de haine et renforcer l'efficacité des enquêtes. Nous avons également renforcé nos moyens pour lutter contre la haine sur Internet en instituant un parquet spécialisé, en créant un observatoire de la haine en ligne qui rassemble plateformes, associations, chercheurs et institutions sous l'égide de notre régulateur, le CSA. Cet effort, nous le menons également à l'international pour faire avancer la régulation des plateformes en coordination avec justement ces petites plateformes et nos partenaires. C'est tout l'objectif de ce que nous avons appelé en mai 2019 l'appel de Christchurch, que nous avons lancé ici même à l'Élysée avec la première ministre de Nouvelle-Zélande, Mme Jacinda Ardern, et que les États-Unis ont rejoint en mai de cette année. Je souhaite à nouveau saluer cette décision qui souligne la convergence de nos actions pour lutter contre les contenus qui conduisent à la violence et au terrorisme. Cette alliance autour justement de l'appel de Christchurch, c'est ce qui nous a permis de faire avancer la lutte contre justement tous les discours de terrorisme, mais aussi la haine en ligne et l'antisémitisme en ligne. C'est ce que nous renforçons aussi dans les enceintes européennes à travers tout le travail que nous avons commencé, et une législation de la fin de l'année dernière, et que nous allons poursuivre grâce aux travaux de la Commission que la France a largement inspiré. La France entreprend également un effort massif en faveur de l'éducation et de la formation, pour à la fois mieux protéger les victimes de l'antisémitisme à l'école et accompagner les équipes éducatives. L'enseignement de la Shoah, articulé à celui des manifestations de l'antisémitisme contemporain, doit permettre justement de lever les préjugés, de briser les stéréotypes. Et c'est pourquoi cette bataille à l'école est essentielle. C'est pourquoi l'éducation est le cœur de cette lutte contre l'antisémitisme. À cet égard, je comprends l'émotion provoquée par la récente décision de justice dans l'affaire du meurtre de Sarah Halimi. Je souhaite sur ce point clarifier que cette décision n'a à aucun moment nié la nature antisémite de cet acte. En revanche, la Cour de cassation a appliqué le droit en vigueur, selon lequel une personne n'ayant pas son discernement ne peut être jugée responsable pénalement. Aussi, en protégeant de manière absolue la liberté juridictionnelle, qui est consubstantielle justement de l'indépendance de l'autorité judiciaire, j'ai toutefois demandé que nous puissions faire évoluer notre droit. À cet effet, j'ai demandé au garde des Sceaux de réfléchir à une modification du cadre légal actuel dans le cas où l'auteur aurait absorbé volontairement des substances toxiques. Ceci se fera dans le cadre d'une large consultation, car je tiens avant toute chose à ce que les victimes soient entendues. Nous le leur devons. Il est en effet choquant que quelqu'un qui prend des stupéfiants pour devenir comme fou n'ait pas de compte à rendre. Je veux également saisir cette occasion pour rappeler la profondeur des liens qui nous unissent à Israël. Je me suis ainsi rendu l'année dernière en déplacement officiel en Israël dans le cadre des cérémonies de la commémoration des 75 ans de la libération du camp d'Auschwitz-Birkenau, organisée au mémorial de Yad Vashem. L'attachement profond de la France à la sécurité d'Israël depuis sa création et à son droit à se défendre dans le respect du droit international ne s'est jamais démenti. Je l'ai rappelé lors de la spirale de violence qui vient une nouvelle fois de frapper le Proche-Orient. Je me suis impliqué pour y mettre un terme en coordination avec le président égyptien et le roi de Jordanie et en agissant au Conseil de sécurité. Il faut aller beaucoup plus loin, car ces événements sont venus rappeler l'impératif d'une relance décisive des négociations nécessaires à l'établissement d'une paix juste et durable entre Israéliens et Palestiniens. Nous connaissons les paramètres pour parvenir à une solution des deux États. Et la France se tient disposée à y contribuer dans le respect des aspirations légitimes de chacun. Nous accompagnons également les transformations dans la région. La normalisation des relations entre Israël et d'autres partenaires essentiels de la France, je pense notamment au Maroc, aux Émirats arabes unis, vont à cet égard dans le bon sens. Je voudrais aussi évoquer le Soudan, qui doit être accompagné dans son processus de transition. C'est dans cet objectif que j'ai réuni plusieurs dirigeants à Paris en mai dernier. Je poursuis par ailleurs mon engagement sur la crise libyenne et ses conséquences sur la sécurité régionale, qui reste pour moi une priorité. Au Liban, pays cher à la France, je me suis aussi fortement impliqué pour venir en aide au peuple libanais, victime d'une crise aux dimensions politiques, sanitaires, sociales et économiques. S'agissant du dossier nucléaire iranien, je n'ai là aussi pas ménagé nos efforts au cours des dernières années pour préserver un accord qui avait ses défauts, que la France d'ailleurs n'avait pas initié, mais qui avait au moins le mérite de fixer un cadre, un processus de transparence et de vérification. Depuis l'élection du président Biden, nous nous employons à trouver activement, avec nos partenaires, une solution qui préserve sur le long terme la sécurité et la stabilité de la région. Nous allons poursuivre nos efforts parce qu'il n'y a pas d'alternative à une solution négociée. Et c'est d'ailleurs ce que depuis 2018, la France poursuit, en proposant de compléter le JCPOA par la prise en compte des activités balistiques et des déstabilisations régionales de l'Iran. C'est cette philosophie qu'il faut reprendre pour aller plus loin, éviter toute escalade, éviter le saut dans l'inconnu. Au-delà de la question nucléaire, il faut en effet que l'Iran fasse preuve de responsabilité dans toute la région. Des discussions constructives doivent s'engager et permettre d'établir cette paix durable. J'aborde ce sujet avec l'ensemble des partenaires de la région, notamment les dirigeants du Golfe, mais aussi avec les présidents, premiers ministres d'Irak, pays où je me suis rendu en septembre dernier. Et je continuerai à discuter, à proposer, à avancer pour œuvrer à l'apaisement. Je voudrais, pour terminer, souligner la force des relations entre la France et les États-Unis d'Amérique, qui illustre précisément notre coopération ancienne avec l'American Jewish Committee. Le 6 janvier dernier, je me suis exprimé pour saluer la résilience de la démocratie américaine et rappeler que la France se tient, comme toujours, à travers de son histoire, aux côtés des États-Unis lorsqu'il s'agit de réaffirmer la vigueur du modèle démocratique. Aussi aujourd'hui, nos deux pays font face à de nombreux défis partagés, dont ceux qui nous réunissent aujourd'hui. Et sur tous ces sujets, je suis heureux que les États-Unis aient renoué avec l'engagement international qui fait la force et l'efficacité de notre action collective. La France, l'Europe, les États-Unis, alliés historiques, ont beaucoup à faire ensemble en ce sens aujourd'hui. Nous poursuivrons nos échanges sur ces sujets avec le président Biden pour renforcer, par un dialogue constructif, notre coopération face à ces enjeux communs. Les rencontres du G7, de l'OTAN, les prochaines semaines seront à cet égard déterminantes. Vous pouvez, vous le savez, compter sur mon engagement. Vous pouvez, vous le savez, compter sur notre amitié. Je vous remercie.